Let's try that again. Good afternoon. My name's Val,
My name's Eddie.
and you're listening to LPs in a Pod. Today's an album review. What we're going to be reviewing today?
We are going to be reviewing St. Vincent's sixth studio album, Daddy's Home. Came out this year, 2021.
Really, really good album, and very 70s sounding as well. Is what I got from this. What are your thoughts?
I've always wanted to try and get into St. Vincent. I remember I first discovered when I used to flip through records in record shops, flipping through the bins, and I'd always get to the album. What was it called? Actor, and it's just a picture of her face, and I think that was my introduction to her. But I like songs, but there's never been an album that I've been really pulled into, and I thought I really like this, and I think this is a great starting off point because I love this album, and I think it's the whole concept and the 70s vibe is strong, and it's it's great. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the first time I heard of Annie Clark or Saint Vincent was it was with her self-titled album Saint Vincent. It was a little bit sort of art pop electronica, and I think it's sort of, if I'm not mistaken, like her first sort of big album over here in the UK. Like with songs like Digital Witness. I remember she was getting a load of radio play and a lot of time on the BBC and whatnot. And I remember that album. I really enjoyed it for a variety of reasons, but I've not really checked in on St. Vincent until you recommended this album.
Her album Strange Mercy is quite good. I know there's songs like Cruel, Northern Lights on that are really good, and I know that she did quite well with that one. But
yeah, I do like how it appears to me with Annie Clark. You know, she's one of those artists who's constantly evolving. She's very innovative. It's like no two albums sound the same. It's like she's constantly sort of reviewing and renewing the sound that she wants to go for. And obviously watching interviews with her, it's I kind of get the feeling that she's incredibly good at articulating her method and her thought process every time she talks you through the music that she's making. And I think that's particularly been the case in watching interviews for Daddy's Home as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you know where she came with the name Saint Vincent, by the way?
I don't. Go on.
It's a reference to a Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds song. And the line is, "And Dylan Thomas died drunk in Saint Vincent's Hospital." And that's basically where she was inspired to take that name from. And I love Nick Cave. I'm a super casual fan of him, and I need to listen to him more often. He's very, very moody. I have to be in a particular mood to listen to him. But he's great.
That's cool. Are we doing a companion playlist for this episode as well? Because if that's the case, we should throw something in there.
Yeah, we are. I definitely should have put some Nick Cave in it. I might get back to that.
Have a little look and stick that one in with the St. Vincent reference in, so people can hear it at home. But yeah, Daddy's Home, as you mentioned, it's released in May 2021. It is the sixth studio album by Annie Clark, St. Vincent. The title track, I think, is a good place to start, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
So, as I understand, her dad was jailed for 12 years for what she said is some Wall Street shit.
Oh,
so
yeah,
it's a $43 million stock manipulation scheme.
Yeah, some pretty...
and yeah, some Wall Street
some big
shit,
fraud.
Basically. Yeah. But I like how that's represented in this particular track. It talks about how it basically paints the scene of going in for a visitation in prison. And she talks about, you know, signing autographs in the waiting room and you know, but the whole process of like visiting her dad in prison, essentially. And it sounds wicked. It's a great title track.
Yeah, there's a kind of tongue in cheek attitude to dealing with the absurdity of having your dad in prison and also gaining celebrity at the same time, and that kind of like those worlds kind of clashing against each other.
Yeah, when she mentions like walking in wearing Italian shoes or something to that effect. And if you think about the setting of it, like being in a prison, it's that whole weird, you know, juxtaposition. I don't know if that's the right word. But yeah, it's certainly a great title track. I think what I've really enjoyed about this album as well is the opener, Pay Your Way in Pain. That is such a strong opener. I really love that track.
It's hard not to hear that track and not think of Bowie or Prince especially.
Yeah, it's kind of, there's a little absurdity to it as well, because I mean, she's talking about, you know, she's portraying this character who's living in poverty, and how it shows the sort of loss of dignity that you have when you're in that position. She talks about being hungry but not having any money when she goes to the shop, and then she goes to the bank and they tell her they couldn't find a record, there's no money there. She goes to the park to, you know, just watch the children play, but the mums are telling her to get lost because she looks like she's in poverty, essentially.
Yeah, definitely feels like a 2020 album. I'm getting 2020 vibes from it. Just everything's going wrong at once.
Oh mate, yeah, tell me about it. But yeah, it's that sort of like, it's that sort of, that position that society puts you in when you're in poverty, and the way that people perceive you when you're in that position. And it's like, it's almost like nothing's going right. Like you kind of need to catch a break soon because everything's going wrong.
It does set the vibe of the album off really well.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you've ever been in that position, in a position of poverty, it's something that you can really relate to. And Jesus Christ, can that woman wail?
Oh yeah,
well.
I love all the effects on her vocals. They almost make her sound like a screeching guitar, and I think it's really clever.
Yeah,
but the whole scream does sound like a solo. There's something that Prince would be like wailing out.
Yeah, for sure.
I even got like Talking Heads vibes from it, especially David Byrne, who actually has worked with St. Vincent with Annie.
Didn't they do an album together?
They did, yeah. Love This Giant. It's like it's a really good.
Have you heard it?
Yeah, it's really good. You can definitely tell that they both admire each other really a lot, and yeah. If David Byrne wants to work with you, you know you're interesting. But,
that must be, you know, like having the opportunity to work with someone you really admire. It must be so rewarding if it goes right, but so nerve-wracking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if there's a potential for it to go wrong, because you don't want to be potentially blacklisted by an icon.
It'd be the equivalent of me like having drum lessons with Neil Peart and then turning up and you say one wrong thing and it's like, fuck, Neil Peart hates you now.
Yeah. And you don't learn anything because you've got that looming guilt.
Oh man, seriously. Let's talk about the overall sound of this album. One of the interviews you pointed me in the direction for, two rather, was interesting to me. She talks about how with this album, as I mentioned, like it's almost like every single album she makes it's different. You know, then no two albums are the same. But she was talking about how she wanted to make an album where she's just capturing good performances, like just good players playing good music. The groove is fantastic. The production is very layered. It sounds like, to me, if I'd never heard of St. Vincent before and you gave me this album and told me that it was an artist that recorded this in the early 70s, I would not have realized. It's that sort of early 70s East Coast New York sort of thing. There's a lot of soul, some funk, some blues, some psychedelia thrown in there as well, like with the sitars that feature on a few tracks. I thought was a really interesting addition.
Yeah, some of the synth work reminds me of like bands from the 70s, like Little Feat and things like that. Even
Mm.
like George Harrison on his like 70s endeavor once he left the Beatles. There's loads of like there's so many influences from that time period of the escapism of the 70s. I think is really cleverly used. And I suppose there's like a double-edged sword in trying to escape in these kind of in the dream of stardom that the 70s kind of does indulge itself in. So it's kind of like it's very ironic that she picks this time period because there's lots of indulgence in music at that time.
Yeah. And there's the one track as well that stood out to me was Living the Dream, because it has that whole sort of dreamy, slightly psychedelic feel, but it turns into, and I know a few people have said much of the same, but it's, as the track progresses, it feels very much Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd. It's it really starts to crescendo, and with like the guitar solo and whatnot. That was an interesting sort of standout
Oh yeah,
track for
yeah,
me, I
she's really
think.
good at the building sounds and sonic like landscapes. I definitely think that's the dreamscape of it, and the idea of like there's like flying imagery in it that's really cool.
Yeah, it definitely evokes that Pink Floyd vibe. Yeah, I guess you have tracks like that, but you do have the more sort of groovier and more edgy pieces, like Down as well is another one that stood out for me as a track. It's got those sort of funky psychedelic guitars, and it the sort of themes through the lyrics are about like sort of like fighting back against like domestic abuse. And one of the lyrics that stood out for me was it was go get your own shit, get off my tit, go face your demons, check into treatment, go flee the country, go blame your daddy. And there's a certain level of vitriol in that when she's singing it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a bit of a revenge fantasy going on with the lyrics. I had Stevie Wonder vibes from that song, but I think that may be with the piano
Yeah.
work and the bass work as well. Very kind of Commodores in a way.
Yeah, I know she cites it's Talking Book, Stevie Wonder. She cites that as a big influence on this album. Um and same actually with yeah, I noticed a lot of the influences are, very much of that era of like she talks about listening to Fragile by Yes, and how much of an impact that Chris Squire's bass and that his sound um has on this album when she was writing it as well.
Yeah, Chris Squire was such a unique guy.
Oh yeah, for sure. Amazing bass player. What sort of tracks stand out for you though? I'd be
Um,
interested to find out.
I really liked "Living the Dream." That was
Mm.
it reminded me of one of my favorite bands, Azure, more in the vocal delivery and in terms of the piano. There seems to be like, I don't know what you call it. Do you know when you play from a higher octave and it goes down, and it almost feels like a falling kind of sound? Do you know when you start off high and you trickle down the octave?
I don't know. Are you talking about a certain musical
Yeah, in
term?
terms of a piano. I don't know. It's just I can't explain it because I don't play. But this kind of idea of like falling rain in terms of music, I love that sound, and it's played in the background for that
You're
song.
not talking about arpeggiating, are you? Like
Oh, wait, am I
arpeggio?
talking about that? Yeah,
I don't know. I'm asking you.
it's something about the piano work on that one that's really good, and it does feel like you're like falling asleep kind of thing. There's a very kind of like odd slumber kind of dreamscape to it. I really
Hmm.
like that one.
Hmm. I think the melting of the sun is one to mention as well. It's so soulful. And I think it's one of those. I mean, a number of tracks on this album have it, but I do love the choice of backing vocals and the sort of style of backing vocals throughout this whole album. really, really complements the sound that she's aiming for. And also, like, you know, for as a drummer, like, just listening to the drums on this album is just, it's so whoa, just lovely. I love the sound of these and some of the rhythms that the drummer's playing, certain syncopated grooves and whatnot. It's just it's how do I describe it? It's like there's always something going on with those drums that is just so interesting to me, and they're incredibly well recorded, incredibly well produced, and it's the sound is very indicative of that era that she's trying that she's emulating.
Yeah, they do
well.
they do blend really well with the music as well. They don't sound over intrusive at all. I think they all kind of work really smoothly together.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's I mean, I know you mentioned Stevie Wonder already, but you know, the drums wouldn't sound out of place on a Stevie album, I guess. I tell you what, shall we take a quick break before we continue?
Yeah, sure.
On? Cool. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back after this message. You're listening to the LPs in a podcast. If you like what you hear so far, please consider liking and subscribing wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. The handle is @LPsinapodcast. And now, back to the show.
Well, Val, I don't think I just realised something, and that's the very strange irony that we're recording an album called Daddy's Home on Father's Day. I thought it's an interesting fact.
Oh, crap, it's Father's Day.
It is, yeah.
That's a weird twist of fate right there.
I'm curious to know how Annie's celebrating it, but
I was going to say something really harsh then, but I think that'd be really unfair.
No, I don't know where that was going.
Let's just move past that swiftly, shall we?
Yeah, I might talk more about.
You wanted to?
Oh, yeah, talk more about living the dream.
Sorry,
because I've just found some more notes.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. What?
I love the psychedelic nature of it. And also, I do like the whole idea of her exploring fame and how it can change you, and the idea that you lose contact with people. She talks about it in the idea of it being delusions can be comforting, but in the end they can be dangerous, and you can lose yourself to them. So I imagine this song is kind of almost like a siren, like a wake-up call to that. And I find that really interesting because it's almost like the common listener doesn't really quite understand these kind of notions, and it's nice to be able to have them made sense of. And also, I imagine that's something that a lot of musicians go through, and it's nice to hear people that are honest about that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, and I think if it's one thing that I do enjoy about St. Vincent is the way that she writes songs and the way that she gets her message across. It's done in such a way where it does help you to understand that point of view. Like you talk about with Living the Dream, how, you know, not getting too sucked into fame and things like that. I mean, you've put it more eloquently than I ever would, but I get exactly what you're talking about because of the way she's written it and the way that she's put that message across. I think she's great. I mean, I know I've mentioned it already, but Pay Your Way in Pain. I know exactly what is going on with that character in that song because of the way that she illustrates that idea of an individual in poverty and losing their dignity because of the way that society treats people in that position. So I think that is something I love about the way she writes.
Yeah, there's like songs like Down and Out Downtown. I thought that's the right title.
Yes.
I believe that song is about someone who's trying to get home after a night out, and is with lines like she's still wearing her night heels, and just like an experience of that embarrassing nature of traveling home in the morning and trying to seem normal whilst everyone's looking at you and knowing exactly what's happened to you. I don't know. It seems like a snippet of someone's life captured in a song really nicely.
Hmm. Yeah, I can. I was just looking at the lyrics while you were talking about it, and yeah, I can see what you mean. It is, getting the morning train back home from downtown, which is a long way off, and almost like there's a slight element of like slight reminiscence in there.
Yeah, I think it's her
When she talks
favorite
about
song.
I was flying. Oh right, yeah, it's like when she's talking about I was flying over the Empire State when you kissed me and I crashed again.
Also,
It always feels like there's a slight reminiscence there.
yeah, that song also reminds me of that one song in particular makes me think of Planet Caravan from Black Sabbath. Because it's just of the bass line in
Why
particular.
so?
It just reminds me of Butler, the way he plays, and the playful nature of it. Plus, also there's a kind of like a dark tone to it as well. I don't know. There's something that,
Yeah, yeah,
and also because Ozzy Osbourne's vocals are heavily, there's a lot of heavy effects on his vocals, so similar to what she's been doing throughout this album. So I know it's something about it.
I didn't consider that, but yeah, I get what you mean about Planet Caravan actually. And it's actually with the drums as well because it's played very softly, very muted. It's got this nice little sort of thing, but it's not like whacking the drum. It's just that nice sort of soft tone that you hear in Planet Caravan as well.
It's a very different
but I get
song,
what you mean
but
with bass and whatnot.
yeah, I love that. I love that.
But I get the comparison. I mean, I correct me if I'm wrong. I think we both love this album.
Yeah,
it's a great album.
I definitely.
Sorry, go on after you.
No, I definitely would love to own this on vinyl. It definitely seems like one that I would love to revisit a lot more than after this review.
Yeah, for sure. I think if there's only really one criticism that I have
Okay.
with this. I mean, firstly, it was a bit of a slow grower for me. I think I gave it maybe 3 or 4 listens before I really started to appreciate the album itself. But the other thing is, in today's terms, I mean, this is a 14-track album. It's a little bit of a lengthier one. And I don't know, it's potentially because I've been listening to a lot of albums that are more, maybe 9-10 tracks. But after a while, once I get to like the second humming interlude, I think after that I do start to tune out a little bit at times. So I have to push myself to focus on it. So I think if there was only one criticism I would have is it is a little bit of a lengthy one.
What did you think
but
of
again,
the?
That might be because I have been listening. Maybe I'm getting used to shorter albums. But artists are making shorter and shorter albums these days, so it might be that it's just been a while since I've heard an album that's this long. But that was the only criticism. I just found myself tuning out a little bit towards the end. But it's probably
I can understand that. It's about 43 minutes in total. What do you think of the interludes? Because they seem to only start halfway through the album, and I kind of think that's a really interesting way of how they get introduced. I understand the whole idea is about paying homage to her mum singing in the kitchen, and it's all to do with, because the whole album's about nostalgia and growing up with the 70s music aesthetic from her parents. Maybe it's all about memories, and also memories in terms of how music has definitely a kind of anchor with music in terms of memories and stuff like that. But I find them interesting.
Yeah, I get what you mean. They're interesting. Admittedly, I've probably skipped over them a little bit more than I should have done. I didn't look too much into them, not as much as I should have done. But it's interesting what you say about music and memory. In fact, just on a completely on a side note, I remember reading an article in the BBC recently about there's a guy who I think he was in his early 20s or his late teens. It was in a road accident, and they had to operate on his brain because he had a blood clot. And what happened is that he lost all of his memories. And he had like developed like face blindness. Like it's very difficult for him to recognize faces that aren't overly familiar. But the interesting thing, I don't know if this is very recent, but he it was a Talking Head song. I can't remember which one it was, but he was trying to make a playlist of songs from like 10 years ago or so. And there was a certain Talking Head song, and he listened to it, and he suddenly had this memory of putting up the Christmas tree with his mum when he was a kid. So when you talk about how music and memory kind of have that sort of almost like symbiosis, it just reminded me all of a sudden of that article. I literally read it 2 days ago, but now that you're talking about these humming tracks being about like her mum humming in the kitchen when she's younger, I suppose you do have that thing of if you hear a particular melody or a particular song, you do start to think back to when you heard that song. You know what I mean? And that's fascinating. That's incredibly fascinating. I'd love to know more about almost like the science behind that.
Yeah, I think she also talks about it as being like an ode to these little songs that were never recorded and just kind of just lost because they're just a woman humming them in a kitchen. So I think as a musician, I think she was like wishing that they wishing back to those compositions and stuff like that. I know there's huge amounts of sentimental kind of wealth in that kind of stuff. And it's appropriate for the whole theme of the album. But I kind of think it was could have delved into it a bit more. And because it kind of always feels like a bit of an afterthought. I love interludes, like some of my favorite interludes. I was trying to think of some really good ones. There's my favorite one, I think, is from the Avalanches album. I've been listening to that quite recently because it's had its 20th anniversary. But it's a song called Little Journey, and it's a 1 minute 30 song, and it's just like almost feels like a holiday in the Caribbean just crammed into this little segment of the interlude, and I love it. And I think interludes are kind of underrated in a way.
I agree. I'm racking my brains for albums that I know have interludes, but the only one I can think of is Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge by My Chemical Romance.
Oh yeah,
they have a track on that called Interlude, and it's just this almost like Spanish guitar piece with this like haunting vocal over it, and it's about like a minute and a half. But I get what you mean. They are a little underrated because it's almost like, especially if you have like two halves to the album where you've set a certain tone on one half and another tone in another, it is an interlude, so it does what it is. It's an interlude, and then you move on to that second half.
Or letting big songs.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, they're definitely fucking overrated.
Or letting big songs breathe. Sometimes it's nice to have a gap between them, because sometimes jumping to another song can be a bit jarring, depending on how they want the album to feel. That I was thinking of that song from Venus Doom. What was that acoustic song? Does that count as an interlude? Because it's quite short. What was that song called?
Venus Doom by him.
Mm-hmm.
It was called Song or Suicide.
Would you count that as an interlude?
And you know what? It works as an interlude. It's not an interlude in the strictest sense of the word. What I'm trying to say is it's not in the middle of the album. It's not it's like the second to last track or something like that. But it does kind of almost serve as an interlude in terms of how it feels. It suddenly takes this little acoustic guitar break, and then you go into Bleed Well, which is a big pop track, basically.
But that's the only one that came to mind.
Actually, on that note, when you say when like letting a song breathe and having an interlude in a song, I think Arriving Somewhere But Not Here by Porcupine Tree does that very, very well. You kind of have that little bit where the drums drop out and it have the and then the you start to get the heavy guitars coming before that really heavy bit with the. So yeah, I think that almost serves as a slight interlude within the song, doesn't it? Really.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I think it's a good time to kind of give our final thoughts and our ratings. As some of you will have heard on our last episode, we've introduced our new rating, which is there are 10 Ps in a pod, and we're going to give it a rating out of 10. Ed, how many Ps in a pod for this album do you think?
I really like this album, and I can imagine myself revisiting it because I love the whole 70s vibe. And also because I've always wanted to like St. Vincent. I think this is maybe now liking this album, I may actually revisit her back catalogue with a new sense of her as a musician. I'd definitely say a strong 7. I think I'd be comfortable putting it there because it's great. I definitely want to look out and get the there's a nice indie clean variant of it on vinyl that I might get if I can afford it.
For sure. Cool. I would say, you see, when I went up until maybe a week or two ago, I would have probably given it maybe a 6.5. But I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 Ps in a pod.
Oh, wow.
I love the production. I love the sound. It so captures that 70s vibe, the soul, the psychedelia, the funk. It's the lyrical themes. Some of them I can relate to. If I can't necessarily relate to them, I certainly understand where she's coming from. She definitely portrays that message well. I really, really enjoyed this. It's certainly, for me, been very good to revisit St. Vincent at this stage. I think I will probably go back and check out like Mass Seduction and Mass Education. I haven't actually checked those out yet. I did, through this, end up re-listening to her self-titled album St. Vincent as well, and I've got very much back into that.
All right. I might go
amazing
visit.
Artist. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I might listen to Actor because that's one I've always known about. But yeah, I just definitely, in terms of it being a 70s concept, it definitely hasn't been half-assed, and she definitely has the chops and definitely the music knowledge of the influencers and stuff. It definitely feels like, she hasn't just dipped her toe; she's fully dived into the whole waters of music from the early 70s. And sonically, I love the what do you call it? It's a lap guitar, or what's it called?
Like a lap steel.
Yeah.
Like a lap steel guitar. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that works so well, and it's done really sparingly. It's only done when it's needed, and it makes the whole album sound fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you've touched upon it. She's immersed herself in this. She knows her shit, right? She's a brilliant musician, a brilliant songwriter. She is able to articulate her message, not just through the lyrics, but through her instrumentation as well. Yeah, as I said, it was a slow grower for me, but I'm in love with this album. I'm certainly going to get it on vinyl. In fact, I think given the fact that you mentioned you want to start diving into a back catalogue, are we going to do an album review, an album challenge? Do we want to do that?
We can try it. I already have an album picked for you, which was an album I was going to reference to, because in
that case, if we're going to do an album challenge, how about I challenge you to listen to her self-titled album St. Vincent?
Right. So yeah, I've heard a few songs from that album, but I've not heard it in its entirety. So yeah, I'm not very aware of it. So I'll give that one a go. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Well, in that case, I'm gonna challenge you to listen to her self-titled album St. Vincent. What are you challenging me on? Go on. What have you got?
I really like this album. It's Jenny Lewis, and it's an album called On the Line. Sorry for the shine. it's another kind of like really like 70s influenced album. There's a song called Red Bull and Hennessy, and it sounds so Fleetwood Mac influenced that it could easily have been one of those tracks, but in a good way. It's a great album. I saw her live when she supported the National for the same year of this album, 2019, and she's amazing. Like a really good performer, and yeah, I recommend it. It's a great album. If you like the 70s vibes of Saint Vincent, you I don't know, you might like it. It's the whole her live performing band was phenomenal, and I really like it. So I recommend that one.
Well, I'll be sure to check it out. Yeah, I'll be sure to check it out. That's cool. For those of you who may be new to the podcast, the album challenge is where I challenge Ed to listen to an album. It could be something that I think he'll really like, something I think that'll really hate, or something that's just plain funny. And likewise, we'll challenge each other. We then do an episode called the Album Challenge. Our last one was featuring Typhoons by Royal Blood and Tears for Fears by... Tears for Fears. Songs from the Big Chair by Tears for Fears. Definitely go and check that episode out if you like. But in the near future, we'll record the St. Vincent and Jenny Lewis, was it?
Yeah.
Album Challenge. Cool. Well, if you've enjoyed this episode, firstly, tell us what you thought of Daddy's Home by St. Vincent, either on Twitter by tweeting us at LPs in a podcast. That's LPSINA podcast. You can also get in touch via Instagram, which is also at LPs in a podcast. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And finally, one small request. If you like the podcast, please consider leaving a review. It really helps us to grow the show and to get more people involved. We want to hear more from you guys. We want to put more shows out.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed recording this one.
Yeah, it's good. I've been enjoying taking notes, looking it all up. There's loads of really good interviews with St. Vincent for this album. She's been really open about it. So the whole journey of listening and learning about her as a musician has been fun.
Yeah. Cool. Let's sign off. Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Awkward bye. Bye. Nice.
Okay.